The gunshot echoed across the plains as Lucy Addison clutched her swollen belly, racing through the tall prairie grass. Terror pushed her forward despite her exhaustion, the hem of her dress soaked with dew and torn from her desperate flight. Behind her, the angry voices of her late husband's brothers faded, but their threats still rang in her ears. They'd find her. They promised a woman carrying the child of a dead man had no business running from family obligations. Lucy stumbled over uneven ground as the early morning sun crested the horizon. Her breath came in short gasps, tears streaming down her face as she forced herself onward. 7 months pregnant and utterly alone, she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. The small town of Cottonwood Creek lay somewhere ahead, her only hope for sanctuary from the men who wanted to claim her baby as their own, the last piece of their brother's legacy. The distant silhouette of a rider appeared against the sunrise, and Lucy froze. She had no more strength to run. As the horseman drew closer, she could make out a tall figure atop a chestnut mare, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the life within as she prepared to face whatever came next. "Madam?" The rider's voice carried across the distance between them. "You look like you could use some help." The year was 1875, and in the untamed wilderness of the Wyoming Territory, Lucy Addison was about to meet the man who would change the course of her life forever. Finn Iverson pulled back on the reins, his chestnut mare slowing to a stop several yards from the woman. He'd seen plenty of strange sights in his years as a ranch hand, but a heavily pregnant woman alone on the prairie at dawn was a new one. Her dress was torn, her face streaked with dirt and tears, and she looked ready to collapse where she stood. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said softly, removing his hat as a sign of respect. "Just passing through on my way to Cottonwood Creek. Are you hurt?" Lucy's eyes darted back toward the direction she'd come from. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They'll find me. I can't go back there." Finn followed her gaze but saw nothing except the endless grassland. "Who's after you, madam?" "My husband's brothers." She rested both hands protectively over her rounded belly. "He died 2 months ago. They want my baby. Say it belongs to their family, not me." Finn's jaw tightened. He'd heard such stories before: women treated like property, children claimed like cattle. "Madam, I'm heading into town. I can take you there if you'd like." Hope flickered in Lucy's eyes, but doubt quickly followed. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "My mother raised me better than to leave a woman in need alone in the wilderness," Finn replied simply, extending his hand. "Name's Finn Iverson. I work at the Diamond Creek Ranch, just north of Cottonwood." "Lucy," she responded hesitantly. "Lucy Addison." A shout in the distance made them both turn. 3 riders had appeared on the horizon, moving fast in their direction. "That would be them," Lucy said, her voice trembling. Without hesitation, Finn dismounted and helped Lucy onto his horse. "Hold tight," he instructed, climbing up behind her. He clicked his tongue and the mare sprang forward, carrying them toward town at a steady gallop. Lucy clung to the saddle horn, her back pressed against Finn's chest as they rode. The warmth of another human being, one who asked nothing of her, nearly undid her after months of grief and fear. "My baby," she said over the pounding of hooves. "They said I couldn't keep it, that a widow has no right." "Some men say a lot of things that aren't true," Finn replied, his voice steady in her ear. "Don't worry, Mrs. Addison. We'll get you somewhere safe." The mare carried them swiftly across the plains, the pursuing riders falling behind as Finn took them through a winding path only locals would know. By the time the first buildings of Cottonwood Creek appeared, there was no sign of the men behind them. The town was just waking up as they rode down the main street. Shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Finn guided his horse directly to a modest 2-story building with a sign reading, "Dr. Margaret Wells, physician. Dr. Wells is good people, Finn explained as he helped Lucy dismount. She'll know what to do. Lucy swayed on her feet, exhaustion finally catching up to her. I have no money, she admitted. I left everything behind. Finn steadied her with a gentle hand on her arm. Don't worry about that now. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a stern-faced woman in her 40s with graying hair pinned back in a tight bun. She took one look at Lucy and motioned them inside. Another one of your strays, Iverson? She asked, but there was no malice in her tone. Found her running from trouble on the North Trail, Finn explained. Her name's Lucy Addison. She's a widow, and some men are after her, and her baby. Dr. Wells guided Lucy to a cushioned examination chair. How far along are you, Mrs. Addison? 7 months, I think, Lucy answered, sinking gratefully into the chair. The doctor's practiced hands gently examined Lucy's abdomen. The baby seems to be in a good position, but you're exhausted and dehydrated. You'll need rest. I can't stay, Lucy protested weakly. They'll look for me here. Dr. Wells exchanged a glance with Finn. Who exactly is pursuing you, Mrs. Addison? The Prescott brothers, my husband's family. Lucy closed her eyes. Thomas died in a mining accident. His brothers said I couldn't raise a Prescott child alone, that I'd have to marry one of them or give up the baby once it's born. Finn's expression darkened. The Prescotts have a homestead about 20 miles east of here. Bad reputation. That's putting it mildly, Dr. Wells agreed. They've had run-ins with the law before. Lucy's hands trembled in her lap. I just want to keep my baby. Is that so wrong? No, Mrs. Addison, it's not. Dr. Wells patted her shoulder. You'll stay here today. I have a small room in the back. We'll figure something out. Finn replaced his hat on his head. I need to report to work, but I'll check on you later. The Prescotts won't bother you while you're in town. As he turned to leave, Lucy caught his sleeve. Thank you, Mr. Iverson. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along. Something in her grateful expression stirred something in Finn he thought long buried. Just doing what anyone would do, madam. But as he mounted his horse and rode toward the Diamond Creek Ranch, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Most men would have ridden past, unwilling to involve themselves in another's troubles. Yet he couldn't have left her there, alone and afraid. His foreman would give him grief for being late, but Finn couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. The image of Lucy's frightened eyes stayed with him as he rode along with the fierce determination he'd seen behind her fear. She was a fighter, that one, and something told him she'd need all that fight in the days to come. Dr. Margaret Wells watched through her window as Finn Iverson rode away. When she turned back to her patient, she found Lucy Addison struggling to stay awake, her eyelids drooping despite her obvious effort. You're safe now, Margaret told her, helping her to the small room at the back of the clinic. Rest. We can talk more when you wake. Lucy sank onto the narrow bed, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. My baby, she murmured as sleep overtook her. Don't worry, Margaret said softly, though she knew Lucy couldn't hear her anymore. No one's taking your child from you. As a female doctor in the frontier, Margaret Wells had seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes. Women left destitute after their husbands' deaths, children separated from mothers who had no legal standing, families torn apart by men's laws and men's greed. She'd made it her mission to help where she could, and Lucy Addison clearly needed help. Margaret quietly closed the door, leaving Lucy to her much-needed rest. She had patients to attend to and inquiries to make. The Prescott brothers would come looking. There was no doubt about that. And when they did, she intended to be prepared. By mid-afternoon, Lucy awoke to the sounds of voices in the front room of the clinic. She sat up slowly, her back aching from her morning ordeal. The small window showed the sun high in the sky, and her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since the previous day. A soft knock at the door preceded Dr. Wells's entrance. The doctor carried a tray with a bowl of stew and a chunk of fresh bread. "You're awake. Good. You need to eat." She set the tray on Lucy's lap. "And we need to talk about what happens next." Lucy spooned the warm stew into her mouth, savoring the rich flavor. "Have they come looking for me?" "Not yet, but they will." Dr. Wells pulled up a chair. "Cottonwood Creek isn't that big. Word travels fast when a stranger comes to town, especially one in your condition." Lucy's hand moved protectively to her belly. "I'll leave as soon as I can. I don't want to bring trouble to you." "And go where?" Margaret asked gently. "You're 7 months pregnant. You need stability, not more running." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. "I don't have anywhere else to go. My parents died years ago. I have no family left." "What about the baby's father's people? Not the brothers, but other family?" Lucy shook her head. "Thomas only had his brothers. His parents died in a cholera outbreak when he was young." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "We were heading west to start fresh when the mine hired him, said we could save enough for our own place within a year." Margaret considered this information. "What skills do you have, Mrs. Addison? Can you sew? Cook?" "Both. I worked as a seamstress before I married, and I kept the books for Thomas's wages." A hint of pride entered Lucy's voice. "My father was a schoolteacher. He made sure I could read and cipher." "That's more education than most women get out here," Margaret noted approvingly. "It might serve you well." The bell at the front of the clinic jingled and both women tensed. Margaret rose and opened the door a crack, peering into the main room. She relaxed visibly and opened the door wider. "It's just Finn," she said, stepping aside to allow the cowboy to enter. Finn removed his hat as he stepped into the small room. His shirt was dust-covered, and his face showed the effects of a day's hard work, but his eyes immediately sought Lucy's, concern evident in their blue depths. "You're looking better, Mrs. Addison," he said. Lucy managed a small smile. "Thanks to you and Dr. Wells." "I came to tell you that the Prescotts rode into town about an hour ago," Finn said, his expression grim. "They're asking questions at the saloon." Lucy's spoon clattered against the bowl. "They'll find me." "Not if we move you somewhere else," Finn replied. "I spoke with my boss, Mr. Thornton. He owns the Diamond Creek Ranch where I work. He says you can stay in the old cabin near the creek. It's small, but it's private. No one would think to look for you there." Lucy glanced uncertainly at Dr. Wells. "Is it safe? For the baby, I mean." "It's about 3 miles from town," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Close enough that I could attend you when your time comes, but far enough to be away from prying eyes." "Mr. Thornton's wife died in childbirth 5 years ago," Finn added quietly. "He has a soft spot for women in your situation. He said you can stay as long as you need, no charge." Lucy stared at them both, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. "Why would you do this for me?" Finn shifted uncomfortably, but his gaze remained steady. "Out here, we look after our own, and now you're one of ours." The simplicity of his statement broke through the last of Lucy's defenses. She nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. "We'll move you tonight," Margaret decided. "After dark. I'll bring supplies for the birth when the time comes." "I'll come back with a wagon after sunset," Finn said, replacing his hat. "Keep the curtains drawn and stay inside until then." After he left, Lucy finished her meal in silence, her mind racing. She had fled one dangerous situation only to find herself dependent on the goodwill of people she barely knew. Yet something about Finn Iverson's straightforward decency made her trust him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since Thomas died. "He's a good man," Dr. Wells said, as if reading her thoughts. "One of the few." Lucy looked up. "The Prescotts will be angry when they find out someone helped me." "Let them be angry," Margaret replied firmly. "This is still America. even out here on the frontier. A mother has rights to her own child. But they both knew that in the untamed territories, rights often meant little without the strength to defend them. As night fell over Cottonwood Creek, Lucy gathered her few possessions and prepared for another journey, hoping this time it would lead to safety rather than more danger. The wagon rumbled slowly through the darkness, its wheels carefully guided to avoid ruts that might jostle its passenger. Lucy sat beside Finn, wrapped in a borrowed shawl against the night chill. Behind them, the lights of Cottonwood Creek had faded, and ahead lay only the vast, starlit expanse of the Wyoming wilderness. "Not much further," Finn said, keeping his voice low despite the isolation. "The cabin's just beyond those trees." Lucy nodded, too tired and anxious for conversation. The baby stirred within her, as if sensing her unease. She rubbed her belly gently, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed herself. The cabin materialized out of the darkness like an apparition, a simple one-room structure with a stone chimney, nestled at the edge of a copse of cottonwood trees. A small creek gurgled nearby, providing a soothing backdrop to the night sounds. "It's not much," Finn apologized as he helped Lucy down from the wagon. "But it's solid. No leaks, and the fireplace draws well." Inside, the cabin was spare but clean. A narrow bed stood against one wall, a table and 2 chairs occupied the center, and a small cook stove sat in the corner opposite the fireplace. Someone had been there already. A fire burned low in the grate, a lantern glowed on the table, and fresh linens covered the bed. "Mrs. Thornton used to come here to paint," Finn explained, carrying in the supplies Dr. Wells had sent. "Mr. Thornton couldn't bear to use it after she died, but he kept it maintained." Lucy ran her hand over the smooth wooden table. "It's perfect. I don't know how to thank you, all of you." "No need for thanks." Finn set a basket of food on the table. "There's enough here to last a few days. I'll bring more supplies when I can. The ranch hands don't come this way often, so you should have privacy." Lucy sank into one of the chairs, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the day. "What if the Prescotts find out where I am?" Finn's expression hardened. "Diamond Creek Ranch is Thornton land. The Prescotts wouldn't dare trespass without consequences." He hesitated, then added, "I'll check on you when I can. If you need help, there's a bell outside. Ring it hard enough, and someone from the ranch will hear it." As he turned to leave, Lucy caught his hand impulsively. "Why are you doing all this, Mr. Iverson? You don't even know me." Finn looked down at their joined hands, then gently disengaged his fingers. "I had a sister once. Her husband died in the war, leaving her with a child on the way. Nobody helped her when she needed it." His voice grew rough. "She didn't survive the birth. Neither did the baby." Understanding dawned in Lucy's eyes. "I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago." Finn stepped back, placing his hat on his head. "Get some rest, Mrs. Addison. You're safe here." After he left, Lucy secured the door and explored her new sanctuary. Someone had stocked the small shelf with essential salt, sugar, coffee, and flour. A stack of firewood stood ready beside the fireplace. In the corner, she was surprised to find a trunk containing fabric scraps, needles, and thread, the abandoned hobby materials of the late Mrs. Thornton, perhaps. Lucy unpacked the few belongings she had managed to grab when she fled. A photograph of Thomas on their wedding day, his pocket watch that had been returned to her after the accident, and the small silver locket that contained a tiny curl of her mother's hair. Such meager tokens to represent a life. As she prepared for bed, Lucy caught her reflection in a small mirror hanging on the wall. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her chestnut hair hung limp around her face. She hardly recognized herself. This frightened, desperate woman seemed far removed from the hopeful bride who had traveled west with dreams of a new beginning. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child as she crawled into bed. "I promise you that." But as sleep claimed her, Lucy couldn't help wondering if that was a promise she could keep. The following weeks settled into an unexpected routine. True to his word, Finn visited every few days, bringing supplies and news from town. Dr. Wells came once a week to check on Lucy's condition, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy despite the recent hardships. The Prescott brothers had indeed scoured Cottonwood Creek looking for Lucy, but found no trace. According to Finn, they'd ridden out after 2 days, vowing to return. The threat of their return hung over Lucy like a storm cloud, but as days passed without incident, she allowed herself small moments of peace. Late October brought crisp mornings and golden afternoons. Lucy found herself venturing outside more often, walking along the creek or sitting in the dappled shade of the cottonwoods. Her body grew heavier as the baby developed, but her spirit lightened with each passing day of freedom. On one such afternoon, she sat on a fallen log by the creek, sewing a small gown from fabric she'd found in Mrs. Thornton's trunk. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up, tensing until she recognized Finn's chestnut mare. "You shouldn't be out in the open," he chided gently as he dismounted. Lucy held up the tiny garment. "I needed the light to sew. Besides, it's too beautiful a day to stay inside." Finn couldn't argue with that. The autumn sunlight cast everything in gold, including Lucy herself. Her hair shone with auburn highlights, and her skin had regained its healthy glow. The fear that had shadowed her face when they first met had receded, replaced by a quiet determination he admired. He secured his horse and sat beside her on the log, leaving a respectful distance between them. From his saddlebag, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Thought you might like something to read," he said, passing it to her. "Dr. Wells said you were educated." Lucy unwrapped the package to find a well-worn copy of Wuthering Heights. A smile lit her face. "I've always wanted to read this. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I haven't read it myself, so I don't know if it's any good." Lucy's fingers caressed the cover. "Haven't you ever read for pleasure, Mr. Iverson?" Finn looked embarrassed. "Never had much schooling. I can read well enough to get by signs, simple instructions. But books like that?" He gestured at the novel. "They're beyond me." Lucy studied him with new eyes. This man who had shown such compassion and intelligence had never had the opportunity to discover the worlds contained in books. On impulse, she said, "I could read it to you. When you visit." Surprise flickered across Finn's face. "You wouldn't mind?" "I'd enjoy it," Lucy assured him. "It would be nice to have someone to talk with about the story." Something warm kindled in Finn's eyes. "I'd like that, Mrs. Addison." "Lucy," she corrected him softly. "After everything you've done, I think you can call me Lucy." "Lucy," he repeated, as if testing the sound of her name on his lips. She returned to her sewing, and they sat in companionable silence for a while. Lucy was acutely aware of Finn beside her, his steady presence, the faint scent of leather and horses that clung to his clothes, the careful way he kept a proper distance between them despite their solitude. "What will you do after the baby comes?" Finn asked eventually. Lucy's hands stilled. It was a question she'd asked herself countless times. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't stay hidden forever. The baby will need more than I can provide here." "You could leave the territory," Finn suggested. "Start fresh somewhere else." "With what?" Lucy gestured at her meager possessions. "I have no money, no home, nothing to sell except my sewing skills. And even if I did manage to get away, the Prescotts could still come after us. They're determined that no Prescott child will be raised outside the family." Finn's jaw tightened. "There has to be a way." "Perhaps," Lucy said, but her voice lacked conviction. "For now, I'm just grateful for this sanctuary." As the sun began its descent, Finn reluctantly stood to leave. "I'll be back in a few days. Is there anything specific you need?" Lucy thought for a moment. "More thread, if possible. And perhaps some paper and a pencil? I'd like to start teaching you to read properly. Finn looked startled. You'd do that? Why not? I was raised by a teacher, after all, and it would give me something useful to do. She smiled up at him. Consider it payment for your kindness. Finn shook his head. You don't owe me anything, Lucy. Perhaps not, but I'd like to do it all the same. As he mounted his horse to leave, Finn turned back to her. Be careful. Stay close to the cabin. Lucy nodded, gathering her sewing materials. I will. She watched him ride away, a solitary figure against the flaming sunset. Only when he disappeared from view did she acknowledge the flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. Don't be foolish, she scolded herself as she walked back to the cabin. He's just being kind. But as she prepared her simple supper that evening, Lucy found herself looking forward to their reading sessions with an eagerness that surprised her. In the midst of uncertainty and fear, she had found an unexpected connection and perhaps, if she dared to hope, the beginning of a friendship. November arrived with bitter winds and the first dusting of snow. Lucy's time grew closer, her body heavy and awkward as she moved about the small cabin. Dr. Wells visited more frequently now, bringing additional supplies for the birth and staying longer each time. First babies often come late, she reassured Lucy during one such visit. But everything looks to be progressing normally. Lucy sat by the fire, her hands resting on her enormous belly. I'm afraid, she confessed, not just of the birth, but of what comes after. What kind of life can I give this child? Margaret Wells had delivered hundreds of babies in her career, many to women facing uncertain futures. You'd be surprised how resourceful mothers can be, she said, packing away her medical instruments. And you won't be alone. Lucy thought of Finn, who now visited almost daily despite his duties at the ranch. True to her word, she had begun teaching him to read with real proficiency, and he proved to be a quick study. Their evenings by the fire, reading from Wuthering Heights and discussing the characters' choices, had become the highlight of her days. Mr. Iverson has been very kind, Lucy said carefully. Dr. Wells gave her a shrewd look. Finn Iverson isn't known for getting involved in other people's problems. Until you came along. Lucy felt her cheeks warm. He feels responsible because he found me. Is that what you think? Margaret shook her head. My dear, that man rides 3 miles out of his way after working from dawn till dusk, just to sit in this cabin and listen to you read. That's not responsibility, that's something else entirely. Before Lucy could respond, a knock at the door announced Finn's arrival. He stamped the snow from his boots before entering, his face ruddy from the cold. Evening, Doctor. Lucy. He nodded to each of them, setting a bundle of firewood beside the hearth. Storm's coming in. Thought you might need extra wood. Thank you, Finn, Lucy said, aware of Dr. Wells watching them with interest. Would you like some coffee? It's still hot. That would be welcome. He rubbed his hands together near the fire. Mr. Thornton's given me tomorrow off, what with the storm coming. I can stay longer if you'd like. Dr. Wells rose to leave. Perfect timing. I was just telling Mrs. Addison that I need to get back to town before the weather turns. She gave Lucy a meaningful glance. Remember what I said. You're stronger than you think. After the doctor left, Lucy and Finn settled into their usual places, Lucy in the rocking chair Mr. Thornton had sent over, Finn on the bench near the fire. As she poured him coffee, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through Lucy's arm. Shall we continue reading? She asked, trying to ignore the sensation. Finn took a sip of his coffee. Actually, I've been thinking about your situation. Lucy stilled. Oh? The Prescotts rode through town again yesterday. They're still asking questions. Fear clutched at Lucy's heart. Do they know where I am? No, Finn assured her quickly. But they're persistent, and once the baby comes. He trailed off, but Lucy understood his concern. A newborn would make hiding more difficult, and traveling nearly impossible for a time. I've been thinking, Finn continued, setting down his cup. There might be a way to protect you and the baby, legally. Lucy leaned forward. How? Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. Finn rushed on. Not a real marriage, of course, but if you had a husband on paper, at least the Prescotts would have no claim on your child. A woman's children legally belong to her husband. Lucy stared at him, speechless. Finn mistook her silence for offense. I'm sorry, he said quickly. It was just a thought. I didn't mean to— No, Lucy interrupted. It's not that. It's just— Who would agree to such an arrangement? To marry a pregnant widow in name only, and risk the anger of the Prescott brothers. Finn met her eyes steadily. I would. The simple declaration knocked the breath from Lucy's lungs. You? It would be a marriage on paper only, he hastened to add. I would make no demands, but your child would legally be an Iverson, not a Prescott. The brothers would have no grounds to take the baby from you. Lucy's mind whirled with the implications. But your reputation, your future. I'm 32 years old, Lucy. I've lived alone since my sister died. I have no family left, and no particular prospects. Finn's voice was matter of fact. I'm not looking for a wife in the traditional sense, but I wouldn't mind the company. And I think I could be a decent father figure. If you'd allow it. Lucy's hand moved to her belly as the baby kicked vigorously, as if voting on the proposition. You've thought this through. I have, Finn admitted. But the choice is yours. If you prefer to take your chances elsewhere after the birth, I'll help you get wherever you want to go. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the small cabin. Lucy thought of the long, cold winter ahead, the approaching birth, the relentless threat of the Prescotts. And then she thought of Finn, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at something in their reading. Yes, she said finally. Finn blinked. Yes? Yes. I'll marry you. Lucy managed a small smile. On paper, as you said, if you're certain this is what you want. Relief washed over Finn's face. I am. He hesitated, then added, We should do it soon, before the baby comes. Lucy nodded, her heart racing with equal parts fear and hope. How soon can you arrange it? I'll speak with Reverend Porter tomorrow. He can come out here rather than us going into town. Finn stood, looking somewhat dazed, as if surprised by his own proposal and her acceptance. Are you sure about this, Lucy? She looked up at him. This man who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness since the moment they met. I'm sure, she said softly. And Finn, thank you. As he prepared to leave, fighting against the intensifying storm, Finn paused at the door. I promise I'll be a good husband to you, Lucy, in whatever way you need me to be. The sincerity in his voice warmed Lucy more than the fire. After he left, she sat for a long time, staring into the flames and wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. Marriage to a man she barely knew, yet somehow trusted completely, had never been part of her plan. Yet here she was, agreeing to bind her life to Finn Iverson's for the sake of her unborn child. What do you think, little one? She whispered to her belly. Are we making the right choice? The baby's answering kick seemed emphatic enough to be an affirmation. 2 days later, as the storm finally subsided, Reverend Porter arrived at the cabin accompanied by Finn and Dr. Wells, who would serve as witnesses. The ceremony was brief and practical, with no romantic pretenses. Lucy wore her cleanest dress, her advanced pregnancy impossible to disguise, while Finn had donned a clean shirt and his least worn trousers for the occasion. Do you, Finnegan James Iverson, take Lucy May Addison to be your lawfully wedded wife? Reverend Porter intoned. I do, Finn replied, his voice steady. And do you, Lucy May Addison, take Finnegan James Iverson to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Lucy said quietly. They exchanged simple bands that Finn had purchased in town, nothing fancy, but solid and well made. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, there was an awkward moment where neither seemed sure what should come next. Finn solved it by taking Lucy's hand and giving it a gentle squeeze. Well then, Reverend Porter said, closing his Bible, I'll file the marriage certificate in town. You are officially Mr. and Mrs. Iverson. After the Reverend left, Dr. Wells lingered only long enough to check Lucy's condition and offer her congratulations. I'll be back in a few days, she promised, but send for me sooner if anything changes. And then, suddenly, Lucy and Finn were alone, husband and wife, at least on paper. Finn stood awkwardly in the middle of the cabin as if unsure of his place in this new arrangement. I should get back to the ranch, he said finally. Mr. Thornton's expecting me. Lucy nodded, equally uncertain. Of course. I'll bring the rest of my things tomorrow, if that's all right. Finn gestured vaguely around the cabin. There's not much, but... This is your home now, too, Lucy said softly. Bring whatever you like. Finn's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strangeness of their situation, but also a shared determination to make it work. Thank you, Lucy, he said simply, and then he was gone, leaving her to contemplate the reality of being Mrs. Finn Iverson. The following day, Finn returned with his few possessions, some clothes, tools, books that had belonged to his sister, and a beautiful hand-carved rocking horse he'd been working on for the baby. He also brought news that the Prescott brothers had been seen riding away from Cottonwood Creek, apparently giving up their search temporarily. They'll be back when they hear about the birth, Finn warned as he settled his belongings into the corner Lucy had cleared for him. But by then, the baby will legally be an Iverson. They'll have no claim. Lucy ran her hand over the smooth wood of the rocking horse. You made this? Finn looked embarrassed. It's a hobby. Something to do during the long winter evenings. It's beautiful. Lucy was touched by the care evident in every detail. The baby will love it. That night, they faced the awkward reality of sleeping arrangements. The cabin had only one bed, narrow but big enough for two in a pinch. I'll sleep by the fire, Finn insisted, already laying out his bedroll. Don't be ridiculous, Lucy protested. It's freezing over there, and your back will be in knots by morning. The bed is large enough for both of us. Finn hesitated. Are you sure? I promised this would be a marriage in name only. And I trust you to keep that promise, Lucy replied with more confidence than she felt. But there's no reason for either of us to be uncomfortable. We're adults. We can share a bed without complications. That first night was undeniably awkward, with both of them lying rigidly on opposite edges of the mattress, careful not to touch. But as the days passed and they settled into a routine, the initial discomfort faded. Finn would rise before dawn to ride to the ranch, returning in the evening to share a meal with Lucy and continue their reading lessons. At night, they would talk quietly in the darkness, sharing stories of their pasts and thoughts about the future until sleep claimed them. Lucy learned that Finn had lost his parents to influenza when he was 14, leaving him to care for his younger sister Fiona. He'd worked any job he could find to keep them fed, eventually finding his way to ranch work, which he discovered he had a talent for. Fiona had married a Union soldier who died at Gettysburg, and her death in childbirth shortly after had left Finn entirely alone in the world. In turn, Lucy told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's dedication to education, and her mother's skill with a needle that had inspired Lucy's own talent for sewing. She spoke of meeting Thomas at a church social, their brief courtship, and the dreams that had brought them west. He was a good man, she told Finn one night. Not perfect, but kind. He was so excited about the baby. Finn's voice came softly through the darkness. He would be proud of you, Lucy, of how brave you've been. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. I don't feel brave. Most days I'm terrified. That's what makes it bravery, Finn replied. Doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. His hand found hers across the blankets and squeezed gently. Lucy held on, drawing comfort from his touch, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she didn't feel quite so alone. As November gave way to December, Lucy's due date approached. Dr. Wells visited more frequently, noting that the baby had dropped into position for birth. Finn arranged to take time off from the ranch when the time came, and Mr. Thornton, impressed by Finn's dedication, offered his continued support for the unusual family. Never seen Iverson so settled, he remarked to Dr. Wells after encountering her on the road to the cabin. That woman's been good for him, pregnancy and all. The doctor merely smiled, keeping her observations about the developing relationship to herself. She had noticed the way Finn's eyes followed Lucy around the cabin, how Lucy's face brightened when he entered a room, the unconscious ease that had developed between them. Whatever arrangement they had begun with, something deeper was clearly taking root. One evening in mid-December, as a gentle snow fell outside, Lucy and Finn sat by the fire. She was teaching him to knit another skill her mother had passed down, and he was proving surprisingly adept at it. My hands are too big for these needles, he complained good-naturedly. Lucy laughed, guiding his fingers. Nonsense. You're doing fine. Better than I did when I first learned. Finn looked up at her, his expression suddenly serious. I've been thinking. After the baby comes, what should it call me? Lucy's hands stilled. They hadn't discussed this aspect of their arrangement. What would you like to be called? I don't know, Finn admitted. Legally, I'll be the father. But I don't want to take Thomas's place in your child's life or your memories. Lucy considered his words carefully. Thomas will always be part of this child's history. I'll make sure of that. But you... She hesitated, then continued softly. You're the one who will be here, who will teach them to ride and read and knit, who protected us both before they were even born. I think father would be entirely appropriate if that's what you want. Something flickered in Finn's eyes, hope, perhaps, or gratitude. I would be honored, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Before Lucy could respond, a sharp pain seized her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over. Finn was immediately at her side. Lucy, what is it? I think, she managed through gritted teeth, the baby is coming. Finn sprang into action, his movements focused and efficient despite his obvious concern. He helped Lucy to the bed, then prepared the supplies Dr. Wells had left for them. As the contractions intensified, he rode through the snowy night to fetch the doctor, returning just as Lucy's water broke. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the following day. Dr. Wells directed Finn to heat water and prepare clean linens, keeping him busy to manage his anxiety. But when Lucy's cries became more desperate, nothing could keep him from her side. You're doing wonderfully, Dr. Wells assured Lucy as she checked her progress. The baby is positioned correctly. It won't be much longer now. Lucy gripped Finn's hand with surprising strength. Don't leave, she pleaded. I'm right here, he promised, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. I'm not going anywhere. As the winter sun began to set on the second day of labor, Lucy gathered her remaining strength for a final push. With a cry that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, she brought her child into the world. A girl, Dr. Wells announced, quickly clearing the baby's airways. A beautiful, healthy girl. The infant's first cry filled the cabin strong and indignant, a declaration of life that brought tears to Lucy's eyes. Dr. Wells wrapped the tiny girl in a blanket and placed her in Lucy's arms. She's perfect, Lucy whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. The baby had a dusting of dark hair like Thomas, but when she blinked up at her mother, Lucy saw eyes that would likely turn the same blue-gray as her own. Finn stood frozen beside the bed, staring at the infant with undisguised wonder. "She's so small," he murmured. Lucy looked up at him, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" Finn's eyes widened. "I don't know how." "Like this," Lucy demonstrated, then carefully transferred the bundle to Finn's arms. He cradled the infant with exquisite care, his large hands suddenly gentle as they supported her head and body. The baby regarded him solemnly, then yawned, apparently finding him acceptable. "Hello, little one," Finn whispered. "Welcome to the world." Dr. Wells watched the scene with satisfaction, then cleared her throat. "I'll need to record the birth. Have you decided on a name?" Lucy and Finn exchanged a glance. They had discussed possibilities but made no final decision. "Hope," Lucy said finally. "Hope Elizabeth Iverson." Finn looked at her in surprise. "Iverson?" "Of course," Lucy said softly. "She's your daughter now, too." As Dr. Wells recorded the information in her ledger, Finn returned the baby to Lucy's arms and sat on the edge of the bed, watching them both with a protective intensity that stirred something deep in Lucy's heart. "I never thought I'd have a family again," he confessed quietly. Lucy reached for his hand, their fingers interlacing naturally. "Neither did I. But here we are." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside the small cabin, a new family took its first tentative steps into an uncertain future, bound not by blood or obligation, but by choice and growing affection. As Hope slept peacefully in the cradle Finn had fashioned, Lucy and Finn sat by the fire, exhausted but too full of emotion to sleep. "Thank you," Lucy said simply. Finn looked at her questioningly. "For what?" "For everything. For finding me that day on the prairie. For risking yourself to help us. For giving Hope your name." Lucy's voice trembled. "For making me feel safe again." Finn's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me for any of that, Lucy." "Perhaps not," she agreed. "But I wanted you to know that I appreciate you, all the same." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement that their arrangement had become more than either had initially intended. Finn reached out tentatively and brushed a strand of hair from Lucy's face, his touch lingering on her cheek. "I should check on Hope," Lucy said, suddenly flustered by the intensity of his gaze. But as she rose, Finn caught her hand. "Lucy," he said softly. He struggled for words, then shook his head. "Never mind. Go check on our daughter." "Our daughter." The words followed Lucy as she crossed to the cradle, filling her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. Whatever lay ahead, she was no longer facing it alone. The birth certificate arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by Reverend Porter during a visit to check on the new mother and child. Lucy unfolded the official document with trembling hands, Finn looking over her shoulder. "Hope Elizabeth Iverson," it read. "Father, Finnegan James Iverson. Mother, Lucy May Iverson." "It's official," Lucy said, tracing the words with her fingertip. "She's legally yours?" Finn studied the document, his expression unreadable. "No," he said finally. "She's ours." Christmas came and went in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries, as Hope made her presence known in their small household. Finn proved to be a natural with the baby, his large hands surprisingly deft at changing diapers and swaddling. He took to getting up for the night feedings, bringing Hope to Lucy and then returning her to the cradle afterward so Lucy could rest. January brought bitter cold and news that the Prescott brothers had indeed returned to Cottonwood Creek. only to discover that their brother's widow was now married to Finn Iverson and had given birth to a daughter bearing his name. "They're furious," Dr. Wells reported during a visit to check on Hope's progress, especially when Reverend Porter showed them the marriage certificate dated well before the birth. Finn's jaw tightened. "Did they threaten anything?" "Not directly," the doctor said, "but I wouldn't put it past them to try something. They're not men who take disappointment well." Lucy clutched Hope closer to her chest. "What can they do? The baby is legally Finn's now." "Legally, yes. But men like the Prescotts don't always concern themselves with legalities." Dr. Wells looked troubled. "Be vigilant, both of you." After she left, Finn checked and rechecked the locks on the doors and windows. He kept his rifle closer at hand, and when he had to return to work at the ranch, he arranged for one of the other hands to keep an eye on the cabin from a distance. Despite these precautions, life settled into a peaceful routine through the winter months. Hope thrived, growing stronger and more alert each day. Lucy recovered from the birth and began to take up her sewing again, making clothes for Hope and mending Finn's work shirts. Finn continued to improve his reading, now practicing with a book of children's stories he planned to read to Hope when she was older. Their sleeping arrangements remained proper but increasingly comfortable. On cold nights, they naturally gravitated toward the center of the bed, seeking warmth. Lucy would often wake to find Finn's arm draped protectively around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. Neither mentioned these moments in the light of day, but neither made any effort to prevent them either. February brought a thaw, and with it, an unexpected visitor. Lucy was hanging laundry outside the cabin, Hope bundled and sleeping in a basket nearby, when a rider approached from the direction of Cottonwood Creek. Her first instinct was to grab Hope and run inside, but as the figure drew closer, she recognized the weathered face of Mr. Thornton. "Mrs. Iverson?" he greeted her, tipping his hat. "Fine day for laundry." "Mr. Thornton," Lucy replied, relaxing slightly. "Finn's at the ranch." "I know. I left him fixing that troublesome fence on the north pasture." Thornton dismounted, eyeing the basket with interest. "This must be the little one I've heard so much about." Lucy smiled, unable to hide her pride. "This is Hope." Thornton peered at the sleeping infant with a mixture of curiosity and old grief. "She's a beauty. Got your eyes, I think." "Thank you for letting us stay in your cabin," Lucy said, "and for being so understanding about Finn's situation." Thornton waved away her thanks. "Finn's the best hand I've got. Never seen him so settled and content as he's been these past few months." He hesitated, then added, "That's partly why I'm here. Got a proposition for you both." Lucy invited him inside, where he explained that his foreman was retiring in the spring. "I'm offering the position to Finn," he said. "Comes with the old foreman's house, nothing fancy, but solid. 3 bedrooms, good well, garden space, and a considerable raise in pay." Lucy's heart raced at the prospect. The foreman's house on Diamond Creek Ranch would offer more space for their growing family and greater security than the isolated cabin. "Finn will be honored," she said carefully. "But shouldn't you discuss this with him directly?" Thornton smiled shrewdly. "Already have, in a manner of speaking. He said he'd need to talk it over with his wife before making any decisions." Something warm unfurled in Lucy's chest at the knowledge that Finn considered her opinion important. "I see." "You're good for him, Mrs. Iverson," Thornton said, rising to leave. "He deserves some happiness after all he's been through. You both do." After Thornton left, Lucy sat with Hope in her arms, contemplating this new possibility. A real home, a stable position for Finn, security for Hope. It was more than she had dared to hope for when she fled the Prescott homestead 3 months earlier. That evening, when Finn returned from work, Lucy told him about Thornton's visit and the job offer. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her reaction carefully. "I think it's a wonderful opportunity," Lucy replied honestly. But it's your decision, Finn. This arrangement between us was only meant to protect Hope. You don't need to factor me into your future plans. Finn was quiet for a long moment. Is that all this is to you? An arrangement? The question hung in the air between them. Lucy looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her cradle, then back at Finn. No, she admitted softly. Not anymore. Finn crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt before her chair. Lucy, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know this began as a practical solution to your problem, but these past months with you and Hope, they've been the happiest of my life. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. Finn, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I want you to know that for me, this isn't just an arrangement. This is my family. You and Hope are my family. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. We feel the same way, she whispered. At least I do. Finn reached up to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Then we should accept Thornton's offer. Make a real home together. Raise Hope. Maybe even give her siblings someday, if that's what you want. It is, Lucy admitted. Very much. Finn's hand cradled her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Lucy, may I kiss you? As a husband kisses his wife? In answer, Lucy leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as months of unspoken feelings found expression. When they finally parted, both were breathless. I've wanted to do that since the day Hope was born, Finn confessed, his forehead resting against hers. Lucy smiled. I've wanted you to since the day you held her for the first time. That night, for the first time, they shared their bed not as reluctant roommates but as husband and wife in every sense. Their lovemaking was tender and reverent, a confirmation of the love that had grown between them through shared hardships and quiet moments of connection. Afterward, as Lucy lay in the circle of Finn's arms, she marveled at the strange path that had led her to this moment. Running for her life, she had found not just safety, but love. Fleeing from one family who wanted to control her, she had created another based on choice and respect. What are you thinking? Finn murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. That sometimes the worst moments of your life can lead to the best, Lucy replied. If I hadn't been so desperate that morning on the prairie, we might never have met. Finn's arms tightened around her. I thank God every day that I found you, Lucy Iverson. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. Finn accepted the foreman position, and they moved into the promised house on the main ranch property. It was indeed modest but solid, with plenty of room for their small family and the possibility of growth. In April, 6 months after Hope's birth, they held a proper wedding celebration not for legal purposes this time, but as a public affirmation of the love that had blossomed between them. Lucy wore a new dress she had made herself, pale blue with white lace trim. Finn donned the first new suit he'd ever owned. Hope, dressed in a gown of the finest white cotton Lucy could find, was the guest of honor. The entire community turned out for the occasion, curious to see the couple whose unusual beginning had become the talk of Cottonwood Creek. Dr. Wells beamed with satisfaction, while Reverend Porter spoke movingly of love that grows through adversity. Mr. Sheehan and Mrs. Thornton hosted the celebration on the ranch grounds, complete with dancing and a feast that would be remembered for years to come. As Finn and Lucy danced beneath lantern light, Hope sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby under Dr. Wells's watchful eye, Lucy couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Happy? Finn asked, his arms secure around her waist. Completely, Lucy replied, resting her head against his chest. Though there is one thing that would make it perfect. Finn looked down at her questioningly. I'd like to make our family official in every way, Lucy said. I've drawn up papers for you to adopt Hope legally to remove any doubts about her paternity. Finn stopped dancing, his expression serious. Are you sure? Thomas was her father. I don't want to erase him from her history. Thomas gave her life, Lucy agreed, and we'll make sure she knows about him as she grows up. But you, Finn Iverson, are the one who will raise her, who will teach her to ride and read and be strong and kind. You're her father in all the ways that truly matter. Finn's eyes shone with emotion. I would be honored, he said simply. The adoption papers were filed the following week. The town clerk, under Dr. Wells's watchful eye, carefully recorded Finn Iverson as Hope's legal father, removing any question of her parentage and any claim the Prescott brothers might make in the future. As for the Prescotts, they made one final attempt to assert their supposed rights, riding onto Diamond Creek Ranch property one evening in May. They found not a vulnerable widow in an isolated cabin, but the Diamond Creek foreman's house, solidly built and well protected. When they demanded to see Thomas's widow and child, they were met by not only Finn but also Mr. Thornton and several ranch hands, all armed and resolute. There's no one here by that description, Thornton informed them coldly. Only Mrs. Lucy Iverson and her daughter, Hope Iverson, whose birth certificate and adoption papers clearly state that Finn Iverson is her father. He leveled his rifle. Now, I suggest you gentlemen leave my property before I have you arrested for trespassing. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the Prescott brothers retreated, their threats growing fainter as they rode away. Lucy, watching from the window with Hope in her arms, felt the last shadow lift from her heart. They're gone, Finn said, coming inside and hanging his hat by the door. And I don't think they'll be back. Lucy smiled, bouncing Hope gently as she fussed. Good. We have more important things to think about. Like what? Finn asked, crossing to place a kiss on Hope's forehead and then on Lucy's lips. Like the fact that Hope might need a sibling before too long, Lucy replied, her eyes twinkling. Finn's face lit with joy as he gathered his family in his arms. Outside, the Wyoming sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and promise, while inside, a family built on choice rather than obligation celebrated the love that had grown between them, unexpected, unplanned, but stronger for the trials it had overcome. 5 years later, the Iverson family gathered on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset. Hope, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's gray-blue eyes and her biological father's dark hair, chased fireflies in the yard with her 3-year-old brother, Thomas Finnegan Iverson. Lucy, rounding with their third child, sat in the porch swing beside Finn, her head resting on his shoulder. "Mama, look!" Hope called, cupping a glowing insect between her palms. "I caught the biggest one." "Gentle now," Finn reminded her. "Remember, we just borrow them for a moment, then let them go." Hope nodded solemnly and opened her hands, watching with delight as the firefly took wing. "Bye-bye, little light," she whispered. Lucy smiled, her hand finding Finn's. "She has your kindness," she observed. "And your determination," Finn replied, squeezing her fingers. "A powerful combination." As darkness settled over Diamond Creek Ranch, Finn called the children in for bedtime. Hope raced up the steps, little Thomas toddling behind her, both clamoring for a story before sleep. "One story," Finn agreed, lifting Thomas into his arms. "And then, it's off to dreamland, for both of you." Later, after the children were tucked in and the house grew quiet, Lucy and Finn stood together by their bedroom window, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucy asked softly. "Taking on another man's child and a desperate widow that day on the prairie?" Finn turned to her, his expression serious in the lamplight. "Not for a single moment," he replied. "Finding you and Hope was the greatest blessing of my life." His hand rested on her rounded belly. This family we've built together, it's more than I ever dared to dream of." Lucy leaned into his embrace, marveling still at the journey that had brought them here from a terrified flight across the prairie to this moment of perfect contentment. "Do you know what today is?" she asked. Finn's brow furrowed as he calculated. "The anniversary of the day we met," he realized. 6 years ago today. Lucy nodded. "The day you wrote your name on Hope's life, even before she was born." She reached up to touch his face. "The day you began saving us both." "You saved me too," Finn said quietly, "from loneliness, from a life half lived." As he bent to kiss her, their unborn child kicked vigorously between them, as if affirming their bond. Outside, the Wyoming night spread its velvet canopy over the land they now called home, while inside, the family that began with one man's compassion and one woman's courage continued to grow in love and strength. From desperate beginnings on a cold October morning, they had forged a life rich with purpose and connection. Hope Elizabeth Iverson, the child who had brought them together, slept peacefully down the hall, secure in the knowledge that she was loved completely by the mother who had risked everything to protect her, and by the father who had claimed her as his own, not through obligation or blood, but through the purest act of love.